Good day to the listening audience, and I wish all a happy Virgin Islands Day, which is being celebrated today, 4th of July. I am Bernadine Louis, Director of the Virgin Islands Studies Institute, which is hosting today's panel discussion. I am honored to bring brief welcome remarks under the theme, A Lasting Legacy, Fostering a More Resilient Virgin Islands. Under this theme, we will explore issues such as the background of the historical journey of the celebration of Colony Day to Territory Day to Virgin Islands Day, what it means to be a Virgin Islander, our national symbols and their significance, cultural policies that guide our cultural development and culture as an essential element of our tourism product. An earlier motto, BVI, yes, we are different, spoke volumes. What makes us different? Our moderator for today is Ms. Annika Christopher, a member of the BVI Youth Parliament. Again, I bid everyone welcome. I trust that you, the listening audience, will find the presentations and the discussions fruitful and informative. To get us started on the right track, I will invite shortly Dr. Angel Smith to give the invocation. I will then introduce the members of the esteemed panel, and Ms. Christopher will lead as the moderator. I now invite Dr. Angel Smith to give the invocation.
Let us pray. Dear God, our Heavenly Father, as we take time out to focus on our existence as a colony, our existence as a territory, and even now as we celebrate Virgin Islands Day, we give you thanks, for you have been with us through all the changes that have come through time. We open ourselves to you. Give us clear thinking. Help us as we take time out to look at the issues, to look at where we are as a people, to look at the legacy which we would then leave for generations to come. Help us that we would focus. Give us clear thinking. Be with us. Guide us. In Jesus' name, we ask these things. Amen.
Amen. The members of our panel today include, and I will start from my right, from the left, sorry, go to the right, Mrs. Eileen L Parsons. Mrs. Parsons, known to all as Miss P, Lady I, Lady P, is a Virgin Islander by birth. She received a solid educational foundation at the Rotang Methodist School and in St. Thomas. While living on St. Thomas, family circumstances caused Miss P to reside with Mr. Roy, a former governor of the USVI, and his wife, Grace Gordon, at their home at Sugar Estate. On completing her education, however, Mrs. Parsons relocated to Tortola, but her quest for higher education took her to institutions in Puerto Rico, in Oswego, New York, for credits in industrial arts and other courses, a Leeward Islands Teacher's Certificate, an associate degree in secretarial science, a degree in hospitality management destination promotion, among others. Mrs. Parsons has spanned the fields of education, secretarial work, sports, arts, cultural activities, and politics. She held many positions, including secretary in various government departments in the BVI, a teacher in both the primary and secondary schools in the BVI, secretary to the Dean of the College of the Virgin Islands, Executive Secretary of the BVI Tourist Board, Cultural Officer in the Department of Education, Executive Secretary of the BVI Community College, and Registrar Bursa at the BVI Community College, which is now H. Labadie Stout Community College. In 1995, she entered politics, and she was named the Minister of Health, Education and Welfare and Culture, 1997 to 99. She was also Minister of Natural Resources and Labor from 2005 to 2007. In community involvement, Mrs. Parsons has served on many associations and committees, such as the founder of the BVI Community Singers, the Jesters Softball Club, the Blue Wings, the BVI Softball Association. She is the founder, secretary, and treasurer of the BVI Heritage Dancers, and also she was involved with the BVI Olympic Committee. Mrs. Parsons has played and continues to play a vital role in the promotion of culture and the performing arts in this territory. Mrs. Brenda Tai Letsom is no stranger to youth work and young people. She has earned dual bachelor's degrees in music and education from Mount Allison University in New Brunswick, Canada, and a master's degree in education from the University of Victoria, British Columbia, in Canada, which allowed her passions for the creative and performing arts to guide her career path as a primary school music teacher. As an educator for 25 years, she was able to teach music in 7 primary schools throughout Tortola, exploring creativity and expression with thousands of young people. Ms. Tai then moved on to the Department of Culture and continued her creative and cultural promotions through dance and art in the classroom programs in the primary schools. And while at the Department of Culture, the initiative to establish the territorial signs and symbols, the song and the dress national symbols were implemented and realized by Mrs. Tai. Dr. Angel Smith. Dr. Smith is an educator by profession who has worked at all levels of the education system in the British Virgin Islands as a teacher, a school counselor, an education officer, and chief education officer. He has served as a director of the Virgin Islands Studies Institute at the H. Laverty Stout Community College and was recently appointed as historian in the Ministry of Education and Culture. Dr. Smith is an avid storyteller and one of the foremost experts on the history of the Virgin Islands. He obtained his PhD from the University of Hull in England, where he completed a research thesis on the transition from enslavement to freedom in the Virgin Islands. Our moderator, Ms. Annika Christopher, she is a member of the BVI Youth Parliament, and she's also currently employed with the Department of Culture. Dr. Catherine Smith is a Virgin Islander, and she also was former director of the Virgin Islands Studies Institute. She's a lecturer here at the college, H.S. Stout Community College, and she's currently the Director of Culture, Government of the British Virgin Islands. Ms. Bria Smith is a Virgin Islander as well, and she is former Miss BVI 2019 to 2020. She's a member of the BVI Youth Parliament, and she's currently the communications officer at H.L. Stout Community College, and she's very knowledgeable on issues affecting the young people. And last but not least, Mr. Rodney Skelton. He is currently the Deputy Director of the Tourist Board, correct? And he has previously served in the capacity of Acting Director of Tourism, the BVI Film Commission, and also Events Marketing Manager, including sports tourism at the BVI Tourist Board and Film Commission. Over the past 18 years, he has a zeal and passion for tourism and marketing. Mr. Skelton holds an associate and a bachelor's degree from Norwood University in West Palm Beach, Florida, in business management and marketing, respectively. He completed his master's of business administration degree in human resources and finance from Wright State University. He has chaired, sat on, or produced various committees in an executive capacity responsible for such large-scale events as the Antigada Lobster Fest, the BVI Food Fest, the BVI Music Festival, Big Ballers Basketball, the annual Emancipation Festival, the New Year's Eve festivities on Jos Van Dyke, and numerous other community and culture-based campaigns throughout the territory. Mr. Skelton has been featured in several professional publications relating to film, as well as destination marketing and promotions, and on many occasions has lectured at HLSCC on tourism-related subjects. He is now proudly a blessed father of 2 children, including a 20-year-old daughter and a 14-year-old son. There, ladies and gentlemen, the ST members of our panel today, and I will now call on Annika Christopher, our moderator, to start the proceedings. Annika?
All right, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome once again to our panel discussion in recognition of Virgin Islands Day under the theme, A Lasting Legacy, Fostering a More Resilient Virgin Islands. Now, as we reflect on this theme, I want to pose my first question to Dr. Angel Smith. Now, Dr. Smith, this holiday was once called Colony Day, then it became Territory Day, and now it's Virgin Islands Day. Could you take us through the many phases of this name change as well as the significance of this holiday?
Okay, thank you. We changed over the years. We had a change with regards to the classification. Now, most of us would be aware that the Virgin Islands were a colony from about the 1600s, once they were inhabited by the British, and that came through the plantation era. Now, when we speak of the Virgin Islands becoming a colony, we focus back to 1871. In fact, in 1871, that is when the colony of the Virgin Islands ceased to exist, and at that point, they had what was referred to as the Leeward Islands Colony. Now, the Leeward Islands Colony was comprised of several colonies in the Leeward Islands, that is Antigua, St. Kitts Nevis, which also included Anguilla, and Montserrat. These made up the Leeward Islands Colony. Each one was referred to as a presidency, and we would have been the presidency of the Virgin Islands. But we should bear in mind, as I said, that before 1871, these islands were in fact a colony, but ceased to become a colony. And if we think about it, we would understand that the plantation era was a very difficult time in the British Caribbean. And once slavery came to an end, then lots of changes happened. And one of the changes that happened in 1853 was the cattle tax riot in the Virgin Islands, which is in the post-emancipation era. And after the cattle tax riot, then there were moves to disband the then House of Assembly, which constituted the fact that the Virgin Islands was a colony and they had their own House of Assembly. Now, this same problem was happening around the British Caribbean with all of the former colonies. And the very first place that you had this major change was in the Virgin Islands, because after the 1853 riots, then there was a move to then change the status of the Virgin Islands from being a colony, as it were, in that sense, to become a crown colony. And as a crown colony, we then fell under direct rule from England. And we no longer had a House of Assembly, but we had what was referred to as a Legislative Council, which was partly elected and partly nominated. So in that period, they went on to, I should say, they struggled on to maintain the legislative systems in the Virgin Islands, where they were still able to pass laws until 1871, when in fact everything was closed down. And one legislative system was established, which was a general legislature in the Leeward Islands, and that was the Leeward Islands Colony. And we then were subsumed under that, and we no longer were able to pass laws in the Virgin Islands as a result of that. So that system continued up until the 1900s. And eventually, we would see that in 1956, There was a move then to reestablish the Virgin Islands as a colony, and that was done on the 1st of July in 1956, which became what we saw now as a colony. Colony Day was being celebrated. And over time, the term colony fell out of favor, and eventually it was changed to Territory Day. And that continued up until recent changes with the Holiday Act that then created that change where we now have Virgin Islands Day. So that's a synopsis of the history coming forward from being a full colony on our own to becoming a part of the Leeward Islands, where we were part of the Leeward Islands colony, and then to become a colony once again, and then eventually to be called a territory, and now to be referred to, the holiday now being referred to as Virgin Islands Day.
Okay, thank you for that. So as we talk about this name change, now called Virgin Islands Day, I want to ask my next question to Mrs. Parsons. As a well-known cultural icon of these Virgin Islands, when one says they are a Virgin Islander, what exactly does that mean? What does it mean to be a Virgin Islander?
I am going to ask to be allowed to read what I have written. And these are my very personal opinion, and I make absolutely no excuse for what I am going to say. A Virgin Islander has to be able to trace his parentage back 3 generations of Virgin Islanders on both sides. The virtues or characteristics by which we were once known used to be good manners, friendliness, kindness to each other, and the stranger within our gates. Children were mostly well-behaved, and the villages raised the children.
Okay, thank you. So I want to get another perspective. Ms. Smith, Bria, for you, coming from a young person, your perspective, what is your understanding of a Virgin Islander?
That's a good question, and I wish I could answer it with just one answer. But if we kind of pay attention to what Mrs. Parsons just shared, where you have to trace the background, and you mentioned the different kind of customs and values that we have. In this time that we're in, and I guess in this generation that I am in as well, we can rarely find persons that can trace themselves back to that group of persons, you know. So to be able to say that, I can't say that. And I can't say that for everybody, because though I can trace my heritage as far back as that, majority of the persons in my age group today cannot. So the perspective of being a Virgin Islander has changed over the years. And I think it has to, I guess all of us now, have to really define or redefine what that looks like. Is it really the focus on traditions? Is it really now the focus on our values? Because if we now focus too much on too many things, then we've lost what it means to be a Virgin Islander, to be honest. So we have to really kind of, given a reference of a soup, let's say if you're making a soup, what are the key ingredients to that soup? So you have to answer the question of what are the key ingredients to being a Virgin Islander? And we really have to identify what those things are and stamp it in, because as time goes on, some of the things are going to change. And we're seeing that today.
Right, and you said something interesting just now. You talked about the fact that there are persons within your friend group who themselves, you know, can't trace that back. So I want to ask this question to the entire panel to kind of discuss, is our culture dying? Is what it means to be a Virgin Islander, are we losing that? For anyone to respond.
Well, I think culture continues to evolve, in my estimation. What sticks is your heritage. And I think just in the way we're dressed and we're talking about territorial songs and symbols, and there's the constitutional side of what a Virgin Islander is, which Miss P alluded to. But I think the heritage is what stays. And as Bria mentioned, she has peers in her group that can't go back 3 generations. I can go back maybe 7, 8 generations, but that's on my father's side. If on my mother's side, no, that's the other Virgin Islands, which was the Danish West Indies. So I wouldn't have 2 generations of BVI Virgin Islanders. I won't be able to trace that back. So these things continue to evolve, but the heritage, we talk about our dance, the way we cook, the way we interact with each other. Ms. Parsons mentioned the friendliness. That's something that we promote heavily on a tourism side of things. The BVI is one of the safest destinations in the region. It's a proud moment. It's an identifying characteristic of the Virgin Islands. So again, just to wrap it up, heritage, I think, is the core that stays, and the culture continues to evolve.
I'd like to add a bit onto that because I agree with it 100%. But then my question again comes to what happens to those, because our heritage and our culture is passed on based on the persons that pass it on to us. So, for instance, I've been able to get that information and get all the things that make a Virgin Islander passed on to me because I have my grandparents who passed that on to me. But what happens to the persons that don't have that? What are we doing to make sure that those persons who don't have that is able to access that heritage, is able to access that essence of being a Virgin Islander?
I would think that is partially the responsibility of the educational system. Culture should be taught. It should not be assumed that everyone will assimilate it.
Yes.
It should be specifically taught from kindergarten, from preschool, from the home. But if it's not in the home, we'll take the next best thing, which is the educational system. And to facilitate that, I think our teachers, because once again, our teachers come from outside our shores as well, I think there should be some system in place, a mechanism in place where our teachers, once you're teaching in the British Virgin Islands, you should be taught BVI culture and heritage, which then would enable them to pass it on easily to whom they teach.
Students.
So it is a process. I think to answer Bria's question, if you don't get it from your family, you should be able to get it at school.
Yeah, and I would add to that this is why right now, as we're revising cultural policy, and we have a cultural policy from 2013, it is with an eye toward focusing or including cultural education, most certainly. Right now, as we're revising cultural policy, which will undergo widespread public consultation, everything that everyone just spoke about, cultural education, cultural heritage, a focus on the creative industries, and of course it has to speak to the diversity, which I think Bria was referring to, that we now live in and with. And a lot of other Caribbean cultural policies are now speaking to that as well. And there are quite interesting and effective ways in which we can sort of integrate and have that shared cultural heritage, which really defines our, Virgin Islands culture. And yes, cultural education would be one major, as Ben was saying, one major facet in doing that.
Yeah.
What I have found, and this is when I was in my teaching life, that there are a lot of children, a BVI father and a mother from one of the other islands. And the thing is, that child, up to when that child is an adult, accepts not our culture, the mother's homeland. I have a granddaughter who is a BVI father, a mother from Nevis. That child doesn't have any bondage to us, the BVI. She gravitates to Nevis is the strangest thing I've ever seen.
It's probably the paternal strength, the maternal strength. The mother raises the child,
Yes.
so the mother's culture is what the child will assimilate, essentially.
So, and then,
But I think, as Dr. Smith, Kathy was saying, the revision of the culture, again, everything evolves. When the culture policy was written back in 2013, it was what we needed at the time. But that's 10 years ago. Time is moving on. Change is happening so rapidly that, of course, it needs to be revised. And all the aspects of it that you mentioned would definitely be welcome in a modern policy.
I think it's a great foundation because it actually speaks to the evolution of culture. In its core values, it speaks to unity, where everyone should be sort of integrated into this culture. It speaks to the cultural heritage must be preserved,
Yes.
must be, everything that there's no question there. And it also speaks to evolution,
Yeah.
to the fact that the culture will evolve. Interestingly enough, I think I remember I was reading through recently culture policy in Barbados, and something really stood out with that. Their cultural policy, our culture began, there's cultural theory. At the beginning, Amerindians, Africans, and Europeans integrated, and cultures would extend. We had bona fide birth in our soil, Virgin Islands culture, Barbadian culture, etc. So that's a process that is ongoing. The cultural policy of Barbados actually says that is happening now. So in Barbados, they ought to make an effort to see where things are with the current identity in terms of cultural heritage, which moves forward and always has to inform culture and cultural expressions today, and look at the impact to which, in a multicultural society, cultures are interacting now, and the very interesting question as to how do we do that? How do we say, what is Virgin Islands culture to a young person today, to a young person of heritage other than the ancestral Virgin Islander culture? To what extent do we have that fixed from our cultural heritage? And I must say, our cultural heritage must inform to the highest level whatever there is today, but to what extent do you give way? Let's look at the festival coming up, and I'm finishing right now. If we go to the village, are we going to just see pea soup, or are we going to say doubles? What has happened? And cultural policy allows us to think that through, and I'm done.
It's a good point, though.
All right, well, thanks everyone for those wonderful responses to that. I want to pivot to another aspect of identity. We talked about the importance of education in strengthening that, but another thing, another way that we can strengthen our identity and culture is through branding. And with that, I want to ask Mrs. Tai. Now, every country has what can be called national symbols. What would you say are the national symbols of the Virgin Islands, and can you explain why those elements are important to us?
Okay, well, I'll start with explaining why it's important, and then I'll go on to what they are. I like to read definitions, so I will read the definition. National symbols intend to unite people by creating visual, verbal, or iconic representations of the nation's national people, values, goals, or history. That's why we need our national symbols. They can be an object, a sign, or an emblem. It is the basic element of our national identification. And, I like this part, the meanings of national symbols may evolve or even be replaced. Think about that. They may evolve or even be replaced, being invoked or indeed constructed in a political, social, or cultural application. So again, nothing is static. But to get to your question, which is I'm excited about, as I was read in my bio, this is one of the things I am most proud about having accomplished in my my career, the establishment of the territorial signs and symbols. So we're not a nation with a big N, so we're still a territory. And the correct name is territorial signs at this time. First of all, we have a badge, and I would like to say what it is, the description, when it was established, and by whom, which is important as well. How did we get these symbols? So the first thing we had was the badge, which is the coat of arms and the vigilante. The coat of arms is a lovely St. Ursula with her 11 lamps, and she's holding one, so there's 12. So there are 12 lamps on there. And that was established in 1960 by the United Kingdom. That was given to us as a people. The flag, which is the blue ensign, and the Union Jack badge, that was also established in 1960, again given to us by the United Kingdom. Our motto, which is be watchful, which is what vigilante means, again, part of that package was given to us by the United Kingdom in 1960. Now I have on shore for this. There's the bird and the tree. The bird is the Zenaida and it's the turtle dove. And that was because there was a plethora of turtle doves everywhere. You can't find one now. But back before, there were probably hundreds of thousands of them. So it became the bird of the territory. Now, I would need the historians to tell me when this was established, because I couldn't find that information, when it was established that this was our bird. The tree, the white cedar, I'm not sure when it was established, but I know why it was established. Because the white cedar tree was used in all our sloops. And those were the boats that were traditionally indigenously created in the Virgin Islands. And those trees are still everywhere today. After that time, in 2009, the government of the Virgin Islands, through the Department of Culture, decided that they wanted to establish more signs, more symbols. And through a focus group, we came up with the colors, the flower, the dish, and the music. And this focus group included persons from Anegada to Yuspandyke. It was 31 people, and we gave them options, and they voted. We had discussions. It was such a rich time because I met so many different people, and they were very strong in their opinions what they should be. And the dish is fish and fungi. Whether it's in mayonnaise or butter, that's a whole different battle, but it's fish and fungi. And the flower, because we already had the tree, the white cedar, it made sense to have the flower also be the white cedar. And the music is fungi music. I don't know how many people really know that that is the music of the Virgin Islands. It's our scratch music, cariso, bambula, kwelbe, whatever you want to call it. That is our official music of the Virgin Islands. So all those happened in 2020. In 2010, 12 years ago now, 12 years ago. And then we had two big ones left, our song and our dress. How will we be identified as a Virgin Island? By the things that we wear. And when will we hear a song that lifts us, it talks about our past, our present, and who we hope to be? And those are the reasons why those came about. And most countries do have a national song and a national dress. And that happened in 2012, that to my left, Mrs. Parsons, was the chairman of the Ad Hoc Committee on Territorial Song and Dress. It was a 5-member committee, including myself as the acting director at the time, Dr. Wheatley, Ms. Sheila Brathwaite, the late Honorable Dolores Christopher, who was always passionate about her culture. And we decided to have a competition. So we had a competition. And I think we had 7 submissions for the clothing, for the dress, male and female. And then we had 24 submissions for the song. Believe it, we had 24 submissions for that song. And we had first time we've had an online poll. We used the, what are they now? BVI News platform, and I think we used Platinum platform. So the general public could vote. And then after we had some top 5, we got top 5 in both of them, we brought in a panel of judges to narrow it down to the top 3. And then There was a huge event on Sunday, the 10th of June, 2012, here, where we brought it to the public. So the general public came, the top 3 songs were sung, the clothing was made, and again, the public gave us their opinion as to what they thought would be best. I must say that at the end of all that process, all British Virgin Islands, written by Miss Ayanna Hall and Kareem Nelson Hall, won, and is now our official territorial song. And Mrs. Florence Phillip and Miss Kristen Fraser, they were so close that people liked both of what they did that they eventually joined together and created the outfit we made. Now, the one interesting about our territorial wear, which I need to mention, is that our territorial wear is all about our Virgin Islands print. So the Virgin Islands print was created by Kyron Harry, but it features the turtle dove, the oleander, hibiscus, soursop, sugar apple, and of course, our Virgin Islands sloop. So they can have whatever colors they want, but unless it has our territorial print in that design, it is not our official territorial wear. So again, we have a badge, a flag, motto, bird, tree, the colors. Oh, how could I forget the colors? The colors are important because sun, yellow, green, the verdant hills, blue, the Caribbean Sea, white, the beaches, and my personal favorite, red, which is for the fiery nature of our Virgin Islanders. And you just heard Dr. Smith talk about the 1983 riots. There was the riots down in the Josiah's Bay plantation.
1853.
There were 1853, sorry. And then there was Christopher Fleming. And then there was the Theodore Faulkners and the March of 1949. There was a time when we stood for what we believed in. We weren't always ruckus, but we were steadfast in what we believed we deserved, and whatever we intended, we made it happen. And I do believe that we still have that spirit within us. We don't need to be rude or crude. We just need to recognize that as Virgin Islands, what we deserve and demand it. So yes, red, the fiery nature of Virgin Islanders.
Thank you for that. I like where you said earlier when you talked about the symbols, how they are not static. I think it goes back to what we all were saying with how culture is evolutionary. You know, it's always changing and expanding. My next question is to Mr. Skelton. I want to talk about the whole idea of branding from a tourism perspective. So what are some of the things that the BVI Tourist Board is doing to further integrate culture into our tourism product and our branding?
All right. Without a doubt, culture is an important part of what guests expect to experience when they come to a destination. The tough part for us, and I'll start there, the tough part for us is from the outside looking in to the guest that's coming from Europe, from the UK, we're now in the Nordic region. It's very hard for them to differentiate between Virgin Islands culture and symbolism and, say, Anguilla or St. Kitts or even as far down as Barbados. It's hard for them. From the outside looking in, the Caribbean is one region. It's hard for them to tell the difference between the Garifunas and or Quelbe music, more used in, let's say, St. Croix, Quelbe, versus Fungi music in the British Virgin Islands. So while it's an important part of our product, in our marketing, what we promote is when you get to the BVI, this is a place where you're going to experience an amazing culture. So it's a little bit different. If you hear Italy, France, there's a certain nostalgia, there's a certain romance that is automatically associated with those cultures. You hear Brazil, it's a little bit more fiery. I'll use the word fiery in how they are known. It's hard from the outside world looking in, they don't differentiate. The BVI has, I'm going to pivot for a little bit and come back. The BVI has the highest repeat guest rate of any Caribbean destination. But we're not as known as Barbados, Bahamas, Jamaica, Cuba. it speaks to what the guests experience when they get here. It's a reason why they come back and they bring their kids. And when their kids are grown, the kids are bringing the grandkids. And we have multi-generations of families coming to the BVI. You go over to One Love Shack at on White Bay on Jas Van Dyke. You see names of families and the dates that they have come, and they go right back when they come back and they, hey, I was here last year and I'm here again. Our culture is special. Once they get here and they experience who we are as Virgin Islanders, it's unmistakable. I'll tell you about me. I'm going on. I love this. I'm passionate about this. I came back to the British Virgin Islands, come every summer, spend all my summers there, 3-4 months at a time. And I came back when my father had a little procedure that he had to have done, and that was 1998. I only planned to be here for the summer. I planned to come to enjoy our festival and eat and drink, and I left a house in Atlanta, Georgia, and cars and all that stuff. And BVI just sticks. That's how much years ago? 24 years, and I haven't gone anywhere yet. I had no intentions of being here in the BVI. I was enjoying my life in the States as a young man. When the guests come, they appreciate who we are as Virgin Islanders. They can go in the bars and serve themselves. They know the owners and the owners' families and the kids. They know them by name and vice versa. That's something that you don't see elsewhere. That essence, that experience, when our business development managers, sales team, whether they're in the UK or in the US, that's what they're selling to the travel agents. That's what they're selling to the tour operators. When your guests come to the BVI, it's an unmistakable experience. They're going to want to come back. They're going to be so grateful that you recommended BVI. So in terms of our culture, it's more about the experience. What we promote in the BVI is the experience that you get when you get here. We're authentic. When you go to the restaurants, whether it's fish and butter or fish and mayonnaise, I prefer mayonnaise. I love to see the evolution of that becoming our national dish. But they're going to get an authentic experience when they get here. So it's not so much having mokojumbis in our ads, or we use the heritage dancers quite a lot. We have over the years. We've taken the lashing dogs. We've taken the razor blades with us.
Them with the times.
So we do incorporate that, but it's not so much on the static ads. You may not see a mokojumbi. You may not see a festival costume, because the guests that are coming to the BVI, that's not what they're looking for. They're looking for the experience. They're coming for sailing, and they love our sailing. It is our product. But when they're here, they want to experience these things. So it's a tough mix for us who are in the marketing side of things. But absolutely 110%, it is an integral part of the product that we promote.
I would like to step in here. I had the honor of selling here as a destination for 9 years. And as Rodney is saying, it is the experience when they get here. But I am going to relate something that was told to me that says we are a unique people. I was a politician then. I was Minister of Education and Sports, and I decided to fix the racetrack. I brought in a professional from Kentucky, and he came in, and we had some other white fellows, and a lot of young men got walking at the racetrack. One day I would go down there, I would go down unannounced, and one day Mr. Voorhees said to me, Mrs. Parsons, I have built racetracks all over the world, and I have never experienced a place like this. Mrs. Parsons, what kind of people are you all? He said, I would go in a bar and somebody would say, are you the person building the track for Miss P? I would say yes. He said, you ain't paying for no drinks. I paying for your drink. He said, Mrs. Parsons, in every bar I go, are you the man building the track for Miss Parsons? I would say yes. You ain't buying no drink here. The drink on me. He said, I have never experienced something like this in any place I have been. You all are a unique people.
And I think that goes back to what Rodney was, the whole issue of kindness, openness. We welcome everybody. I always say that we in the BVI, we like to over. We just over. And I can relate to the experience. I was at Althea Scatliff for several years. And every year, the Alamala School, you should know the Alamala, you would remember this, the Alamala School would come up to Althea Scatliff, the teachers, the students. Man, there was more food than any carnival you ever saw. As they came on the first boat in the morning, they had the breakfast spread, they had lunch, they had snacks, they had cakes, they had tarts, they had every single thing. There were crates to take back home. They had, the corn pork would disappear in 5 minutes. There were certain things we had to have because this is what they came up for our culture. You know, they came up to taste what we had. And we had exchange, we had cultural exchanges, we had dances, we had basketball games, we exchanged. But the food was such an integral part of that exchange. And I remember one year, some friends, some other teachers says, man, they're always coming up, let's go to St. Thomas.
Don't do it, don't
So
say
we went, okay,
it.
let's go to St. Thomas.
I was one of them that went
Listen, they took us into a room.
to the cafeteria.
And they gave us these little packages you get in the the cafeteria that you pull off the cover. And I sat down and I looked at it and I went, that's what we're supposed to eat? And they were like, yeah. And we sat there and we looked. The experience was as 180 degrees. And I said to them, first of all, I said, never again. But never again will they can come, we'll treat you. But the experience, the way we as Virgin Islanders embrace everybody. And we go all up because we were taught, at least I was taught, you give the best of what you have to your guests.
You have to take it off your
And that is a big part of our, integral part
of who we are.
a tacit, is tacit the word? A tacit part of our culture. So yes, we still over it.
We play sports.
Yes.
Bria and I, sorry, BSP, we play sports. Whenever we have any kind of tournament or any activity here in the BVI, just like what you're saying, awesome spread. We just came from St. Croix, one of my other homes, and our players, what they had to eat weren't the best. But we know when they come here, what we share. I'll give one more example. We talk about bars. I frequent a bar or two from time to time. And when I first moved back to the BVI in 98, 99, I hung out up in Huntam's Gut by Kitty, Ronnie Smith, who's passed on. And you would sit there and Miss Lana cook all this food and we eat. And so I get up to pay my bill. Rodney, you ain't got no bill. But what you mean me got no bill? I've been sitting here for the past 2-3 hours. I had 2 plates of food. I sent around, I drink, no, such and such who gone, don't pay everybody bill.
Yeah.
That's one. I'm going to take it further. So now I grew up right next. I was born in St. Thomas, raised in St. Croix, spent my summers here. So I like to pride myself on being one of the well-rounded Virgin Islanders. But it wasn't something that was ingrained in me from the U.S. Virgin Island side. So now that I'm a man, you know, I'm getting this experience here in the BVI at 22, 23 years old. And then I would go back to St. Croix by my mom, and I'd sit in a bar. I don't know who these guys are in the bar. Give everybody a drink. And they would look at me like, well, who he is, who he think he is. It's right next door in St. Thomas, St. Croix. It is not the same. The BVI is a special place.
When I was in my younger days, when I was totally involved in softball and was on the national team, we would bring the Raider girls over here. And I tell you, people like Nana, Miss Nessie, they would cook. And as Brenda said, when those girls going back, not only I never see bigger plate of food in my life, wonder how they going to eat it, but they eat it. And when they're going back with great food. And they love to come over here because of the way we were taught to treat people. Yes, some of that is dying out with people like my generation, but as you young people say, we have to evolve. But sometimes I say prosperity has found us and we were not ready for it. That's my personal view.
Even with the evolving, as Kathy and Ria said, there's some things that are non-negotiable.
Yes.
There's some things that are hard in concrete. They will not move.
Correct.
And I think we as a people, we need to decide what those things are
Yes.
and just stick them in that
Yes.
concrete and say, you can come from wherever, you can have whatever cultural background you have, but when you are here, this is our culture and
Yep.
it's not changing.
Yep.
Yeah, that reminds me of, you're making me think of, I guess, UNESCO policy too, regional institutions. We have to decide as a society what we want to leave behind. We decide. And what is non-negotiable, like as we just saying now. And that's actually like international policy.
Yeah.
We decide. And then integral in all of that, and I don't know how good of a job we've been doing with that. This culture must be transmitted to younger generations, always, constantly, and always renewed. And especially the heritage that we decide as a people is non-negotiable. The pride, the knowledge, the meaning, it has to be transmitted through many different ways.
Yes.
So how close do you think we are to deciding or knowing what's non-negotiable? How close do you think? Or is there some way to go?
I think we know. I think
We know
the process
exactly
that
what it is.
Kathy is talking about, the revision of the national cultural policy is a perfect opportunity
Yes.
to educate, bring along the general public, and then determine what those incalculable, what's the word? It's a word.
Intangible?
No, that they don't move. That there are those aspects of our culture remain regardless of what else changes.
Yes.
And the revision process
Is a part of that?
would be that it would be integrated. It has to be integrated into that process.
I think what I would want to add, even from the historic end, right, is that we're talking about a lasting legacy. What are the legacies? In fact, the things that we have attained from generations past,
Yeah.
that we find that it's important, we value it, and then we find a way how we can ensure that it is transferred to
Yes.
the next generation. There's some basic things about the Virgin Islands which we tend to forget that makes the Virgin Islands the Virgin Islands. And these things go right back in terms of our history.
Yes.
I remember saying to someone once that in the Virgin Islands, we have a very serious look. We usually look seriously at how we honor our ancestors, how we honor the dead, for example. And I always point out that there's one event that can close down everything in BVI. That's a funeral.
Yep.
It doesn't matter, no matter what is happening. A funeral is happening, and everybody says, well, I can't go, I have this funeral to go to because my granny, sister, Nene, Tanti, Nana died, and I'm going to the funeral. And we find it strange because it's a part of the legacy. And I will tell you even further. From the historic end, I went into the records, and in 1831, there was a conspiracy by the enslaved people to rise up. And this conspiracy was planned down to the wire. And the men gathered in Road Town one Sunday night. And they are ready because they have a plan how they're going to take the town and indeed the Tortola and the Virgin Islands. But something happened. More than half of the people who were supposed to show up didn't appear there that night. So they had to put it off and went back home. And you know what it was? There were 2 elderly slaves that died, one in Cane Garden Bay and one in Sea House Bay. The funeral would be first thing in the morning. The men who were planning to go fight for their freedom said, well, freedom could wait. We have to go and honor the dead. And even to today, we still see that, how we honor the dead, how we honor our ancestors, because we see the contributions that they have made for us. So the legacies live on. The issue about land ownership. Well, you start that in any family gathering, you know where that goes. But the issue in terms of the importance of land, why is land so important? This is something that goes right back to our ancestors coming out of enslavement and the value that they attached to ownership of the land and what the land meant to them and how they could support themselves, what they could do because they have the land. So I'm saying there's some basic things in terms of the legacies that come through time. And these are the things that we shouldn't give up.
Yes.
These are the things that, yes, the culture evolves, but they're the basic things that make us Virgin Islanders. To be a Virgin Islander, you must have a stake in this country. That is, you must own a piece of the rock.
Piece of land.
Okay? You must own a piece of land. And then young people are growing up, and then person says, well, the first thing you do, you buy a piece of land. Why? Because that is a part of the legacy of the Virgin Islands. Because what happened in the Virgin Islands in the 1800s, in the post-emancipation era, did not happen in some of the Caribbean colonies. Because in the Virgin Islands, it was a bankrupt state. So everything was up for sale. Our ancestors, recognizing they had an opportunity, the land was selling cheap. They wanted land, so they bought land. So they came together in their family groups, they came together and they found ways to be able to buy the land. And hence the legacy that has been passed on to us, why there are families with still today owning acres and acres of land, because somebody at some point saw why land was important, because they wanted to raise cattle. If you're going to raise cattle, you need several pastures. So what I'm saying is that we're talking about lasting legacies, and it comes right back to our culture, because those are some of the things that make us who we are. And if we change everything else, but we hold on to those. Those are the basic things on which we build.
Yep.
May I add to that? Sorry, may I add to that? The whole concept that we own our land is a totally different mind shift. Virgin Islanders have a totally different mind when it comes to who they are, because I own my land. You can't put me off this. I own this. And I remember going to a UNESCO meeting in Antigua, and we were touring the land, the windmills, and we came upon this museum, and they were talking about how many years after slavery, they were squatting on the land, they couldn't own the land and all that. And I piped up and I said, well, actually, actually, I come from people who were freed in 1776. And they looked at me, they said, but no, slavery was, I said, excuse me, I'm a descendant of Long Look. Stop right there. And we had our land from 1776. So it's a totally different mindset. And they were lamenting, that it was a struggle for those people down there, because even up to now, some of them are just finally getting to own property that they've been squatting on for generations. Whereas from that long ago, we owned our land. So I think we're much stronger mentally, because we understand that we are tied to this land. You can't come and move us. You can come and go, but we're here.
I have always said, if you want to be in good standing with a BVI Islander, don't get between he and he land. Long ago, every year they would have what was called session court, high court. There was never a criminal case, never. But every year, there was nothing but land cases. Brenda and I, as sisters, Papa dead, Brenda is the oldest one. She feels she should get most of the land, and it is in court we're going. But I wanted to say that I could remember hearing my grandmother say one day, when I open my door in the morning and I put my foot on the ground, I step in and what is mine. And that what was hers was given to her father from what her father bought Kutumbe estate, the estate on which his grandparents were slaves. Where my great-grandfather got money from to buy 30 acres of Kutme Estate, I don't know. I don't want to know. But I know I inherited 2.5 acres, which I promptly divided between my 4 grandchildren. And I almost made them swear in blood that they would never sell Katie Ben land.
And that makes you a virgin. As I was old enough to understand anything, that was the first thing my grandfather told me. Don't ever sell your land.
Exactly.
And it keeps going on and on and on.
But I think part of the whole land issue, what your generation, or maybe my generation, we need to do, which is what my father did for me. I was 15 years old and owned land.
Yes.
He gave us our land. That's not what we inherit. That was mine to do with as I pleased. You know, so the idea of you have to wait until you die and all of that, give it to them.
That's another conversation.
Give it to them. No.
We need another panel for that. But I just want to...
My will, I'm giving my children here.
Ms.
It's yours.
I wanted to tie in the tourism side of things. King Garden Bay, who owns it?
I have no idea.
Jas Van Dyke, White Bay, who owns it?
It isn't John Klein?
No. This is it. Well, the point I'm getting to, we go to Anegada, and we go to that stretch where Lowell Whitley had Anegada Reef and Whistling Pines and all of those places. I mentioned the BVI being a special place. When our guests come to the BVI, where else, which other Caribbean country can they go to and enjoy beachfront property with bars and restaurants and owned by locals, where they can interact with locals? There is no other Caribbean destination like that. This is some of the things that we use. I'm on the panel to speak a little bit about from the tourism side of things. This is what we talk about. When you get to the BVI and you go on that beach, you're going to see Lowell Whitley's son. Lowell Whitley isn't here anymore, but his son and his daughter are still there. You've heard of Foxy's? Well, guess what? You have 3 or 4 of his sons here along the beach who own this property that you're enjoying some of our local food and drinks and things of that nature. You do not experience that anywhere else.
All right, so we looked at
I was going to say that for me, this was an easy destination to sell. And I would bring travel agents in even during festival that they would see that in the summer, the winter, the rates were the same. The rates didn't change. I would take them to every hotel, even to Miss Nessie, who told them, well, let me tell you something, you know, it's $10 a night, but if they decide to make up them bed themselves, I could take her 5. And they kind of, but selling here, I was selling our people. I was selling BVI landers, our friendliness, and a lot of that is going out. Nobody in the 80s meddled any tourists on the street. We didn't have people walking about on the street begging. Where we have come is not where I thought we wanted to go. And some of us are going to, well, not some of us, I am out of that, but some of you young people are going to have to be strong enough to stand up and say, this is what you come here, you do, this is Rome, and you do as the Romans do. I have here to say that my grandmother never ate anything jerk. And it seems as that's the only thing selling in restaurants now. Jerk chicken, jerk this, jerk that. And we are not strong enough to say, where in the name of God is the fish and okra fungi? Where's the callaloo? In my house, Ole's night don't pass unless I have callaloo. I'm sorry. Where's the guava berry and the cassava bread? The things that our ancestors valued and put in us, we are being swallowed up by other cultures because we are not strong enough. I wouldn't say strong enough, but to me, we are lacking something that prevents us from speaking out for ourselves. Let me put it that way. You young people with much more, you can then decide what it is. But it comes to me like we are afraid to say. In my childhood, there was no death in the country unless there was a wake. What has happened? You no longer hear about wakes. In every village in this country, there was a Methodist church. And every Wednesday night, there was a prayer meeting. Young Minister Reimer is trying his best. Every second Sunday in the month, he has Sankey sing out. And I must say, it is growing. It means people from all over are coming.
Can I ask Madam Moderator if I can ask Ms. P a question? Can you speak? Because I don't know who all is going to see this program, and it's something I learned maybe a couple of years ago, and I thought I knew, but I was educated differently. Can you tell us what a wake is and what the purpose of a wake was?
As far as I think Dr. Angel is better.
Okay, whoever, somebody educate them, please. It's very interesting.
It's the part I talked about where how we honor the dead. Now, we're talking about a period of time in the Virgin Islands where there were no morgues to begin with. And if someone dies one afternoon, they'll be buried next morning, next day. But what happens is that the part of the mourning process that was in place was where friends and family came and they sit the night out with you. But you don't just sit, but now you have, it becomes now a spiritual event where there are certain hymns that are sung. And in fact, there is someone who is, there are some persons who are considered experts. And these are the persons, like we have a panel discussion, we have a moderator. In a wake, you have the master. And he was the person who guides the evening in terms of the selection of the hymns. And there are certain types of hymns that you sing at the first part, and then as it goes on in the evening, then there are other types of hymns that you sing. And they serve tea, they serve, so there's a refreshment bit. But what it does is that it gives the family that opportunity for persons to sit with them and stay awake. That's what it was. So you stay awake during the night, and you are with them in terms of the grieving process that they are going through. And you find it now that we don't see the importance of it, but then how does a family go through that period? And now the body would have been there, because in those cases, as I said, there was not a morgue. The body would have been there. So you sit with them, and you keep their company. But then you go through this sort of a spiritual. Upliftment.
So as this body or this relative of ours is transitioning into the next phase of whatever our existence, we are there to help them. So they don't have to spend a cold night in a cold freezer by themselves.
No.
So that was a part of it. And that was how in the Virgin Islands people came together. Because now next morning, you would have another group of persons who are going to come in to build the coffin. Okay? And that becomes another part of the process. And then digging the grave. So it became a whole community event. That now has become a commercialized process. That is the change you have in time. But what it meant was that the understanding that we supported each other. And that level of support came from community members, in fact, from persons all over the BVI. I love to tell stories. I can tell you one. I don't know how much time we have now, because I know we have done quite a bit. But there is a story that came out of Carrot Bay, where because the process for preparing the body for burial, again, was done by members of the community, where some men left Cane Garden Bay, went over to Carrot Bay because this person had died, and these men were experts in preparing the body for burial. But there was one word that came and said, well, you don't need to come, because he had said that he does not wish to be bathed, because the body has to be bathed and dressed. And he said, I don't want anybody bathing me when I die. And they said, oh, no, You never hear about that. Anybody who dies has to be bathed and properly dressed to be buried. So they went over to Carrot Bay, bathed the body, dressed him. And the other part of his request was that when he's buried, he wished to be buried upside down.
So everybody could.
And they said, well, no such thing. What kind of thing is that? But they just laughed it off because when they were putting the body in, the coffin flipped over and fell in upside down. The two men who came to bathe the body against his request went into the grave, flipped the coffin over, and the burial continued. But that was not the end of the
I
story.
know that can't be the end.
These men now were going back to Cane Garden in a rowboat. And in Cane Garden, if you know, there's a reef on the one end. And they don't come in the center of the harbor, in the channel. In your rowboat, you come over the reef. Well, as they were coming over the reef, boat flipped because there was a sea, and the two men drowned. There was one woman who with them, the story said that she was about the height of a baseball bat, a little woman. She got up and she walked ashore.
And two grown men.
The two grown men, who were some of the best sailors and divers, drowned. And to this day, nobody can explain that. But they tell the whole story. And they said, well, but that was a part of the social system in the Virgin Islands at the time. Again, what I'm talking about, the legacies in terms of how we supported each other. Even at the point of death, we support each other. And as Ms. Parsons said, the wake was how you did that. That kind of support that came from the community.
And the thing with the wake is that Brenda has a death. Somebody will get on a mule or a horse and it will be announced. I live in another village. I am going, and I'm not going with my empty hands. I'm taking corned beef, I'm taking tea, I'm taking cocoa, I'm taking sugar, that when I get the flour, when I get there, I would be able to give something to the family. Yeah. And as Dr. Smith said, one set of hymns was sung until 12 o'clock, there was the master. Then, as they said, the wake turned over, and other set, and the word was, we sang her over until morning. The wake went until broad daylight, and they sang. But the thing is that you had tea, you had coffee, you had cocoa, and out in the back, there was a little something to keep the cold wind off. As the men said, then there's something to keep the cold wind off them, so they would go in the back and get that.
Take a little thing.
But we live a totally different existence than what is happening now. Now, it has people in my village that I used to know everybody from Low Hope to Great Mountain. Now, you passing people in the village, you're passing Filipinos, you're passing white people, and you want to know how from Low Hope to Great Mountain get like this. But people move in and they build apartments, and people come and they rent them, different people. So we no longer know who live in the villages. Families are split, and the kind of relationship that you had no longer exists.
Well, on that note, I want to go to my final question, because we looked at the territorial symbols, we looked at our tourism product. I kind of wanted to go back to our cultural policy, because it kind of ties into some of the things that we're just speaking about. So I want to ask this question to you, Dr. Smith. I know you kind of spoke early on about it, but could you give us some further insight to the cultural policy and what all it entails and how it will influence?
At this point, I actually think that this answer can partially answer what Mrs. Parsons is speaking about, because she's really speaking about the difference that we see today, and that the culture that we have today, that we're speaking so fondly of, we can't really see it to the same extent today. And I think the value of cultural policy is that we actually get the opportunity to deliberately and intentionally reflect on these things. And the value in cultural policy also is that from cultural policy comes legislation, comes procedures, comes methods and ways of doing things. A cultural policy establishes a cultural institutional framework. So now we can deliberately pull in a Department of Culture, a Virgin Islands Festival and Fairs Committee, schools, cultural groups that exist, and we can approach this in a way that we have a shared understanding. When you want to speak about cultural policy, the first thing you're going to do is define your culture. And I have to agree with what Brenda said. We already know what it is. Now, in the cultural policy of 2013, there was a definition that a lot of people use to define culture, which is generally our behaviors, our beliefs, our way of life. And then it includes also our intangible, that is the inheritance, this rich inheritance that we've just been speaking about, where we decide what cannot be removed and what must continue. And then there is the tangible heritage, and that is that when we step outside, we can touch, see, and feel Long Look, Free Village, Kingstown, another free village, Sunday morning well with the oral tradition that happens to be behind that, everything, our historical sites, our heritage sites, our burial grounds,
Yes.
right? So all of it can be codified, and I think, why not codify? Why not codify this now into cultural policy? Because we already know what it is. It includes our cultural expression, our cultural arts. We just said that we, at the same time as being very loving, communal, and welcoming, we also had this independent spirit that came from land holding. We know that. Okay? We absolutely, I actually think we need to hear from our elders a lot more, because they are the heritage. So we can codify that. How do we really bring that forward? And the point we made earlier, to be sure to transmit that to younger generations, because really, your culture is not safeguarded until it is transmitted and it actually lives, right? So the value of cultural policy, which should undergo public consultation, widespread, and that isn't just about numbers. It's about certain groups, elders, okay, artists, teachers. You really have to get that rich voice. And now we have that shared understanding. We can also consider so many things. We can consider the situation we have today with the diversity that is here. How do we have a strong national identity? Because this is also about nation building. Yes. We have to consider our political selves, our social selves, our economic selves. That all forms a part of your national identity, which includes your cultural identity. So how do we consider, the migration that we're facing, etc.? How do we build that strong identity, which includes all those things I just mentioned, and then at the same time find ourselves providing opportunities to celebrate the cultural diversity that is here, having now built that very strong identity, which everyone is knowledgeable of, including tourists. So to reiterate, I really think that is the value of a cultural policy. We can be deliberate, we can have legislation, policies, procedures, institutions all working together once we all decide on that.
And I think that's the point I was making in the first, when I first said it, is because once that's in place, the generation know that, I guess, that I'm in, or the group from here on out, the youth perspective, that is something now that they can look to, because if they don't have it at home, that heritage, the elders, if they don't have that at home, then what do they have? So there's only a small percentage of youth that might be able to say, I know what it means to be a Virgin Islander, but then what happens to the other group? Those are the persons, that's the future. What happens then to the future? So that policy is going to be so important to drive home that point.
Also, I think for the persons who cannot say that I'm a Virgin Islander, but can recognize what a Virgin Islander is.
Yes.
That's important.
Yes.
Yeah.
I had the honor of being the first cultural officer, and I am here sitting and remembering that today's Mrs. Brenda Tai was Brenda Letsom. She was a member of the Heritage Dancers, and she was a teacher at Francis Letsom School. In 2002, Brenda had a dance group in her school. Cable and Wireless gave me 13 plat poles. I went up to New York and bought the ribbon from the wholesale factory. I came back, I had a plat pole book, I photocopied it, and I gave each principal a plat pole instruction book. There was a dance group in almost every school. I remember going to Eunice Adams School to do the dances. Sister Sylvia was there with her guitar, ready to play the music. The interest has to come from, I have to say, the school system, the culture unit. And in those days, Rodney, the tourist board, Lynette Harrigan was there, and the heritage dancers saw the world thanks to the tourist board, heritage dancers and the Lashendars. And we were dance ambassadors from California to Sweden. We were dance ambassadors for the British Virgin Islands. All of that has gone by the wayside. Only now and again, the heritage dancers are called out. Because of my work with the college, those 7 seats there are mine, reserved, no matter what the college has. I don't have to pay, but I make sure I give a contribution. I came here to the last thing the college had, and I saw on the program the dance group. And when the dance group came out, I mean, it's a good thing that my heart is strong, because the dances were nothing to us, nothing about us. And I said to my friend, the college is large enough that they can have this modern dance and they can also have our traditional dances. A group could be formed to carry on the tradition of our ancestors. It is our, I have to say it, our culture is being swallowed up. It's practically on life support. And I say it, as Pastor Mills would say, without fear of contradiction. A lot of help is needed. Even in the schools, I went as mistress of ceremonies for Culture Week at Elmer Stout High School. I saw on the program a dance group when they came out in these leotards and swinging their leg up in the air and throwing up their hand. And yes, we need a modern dance for you young people, but we also need the traditional things that made us, in the imprint on us, a Virgin Islander.
Well, again, I think cultural policy, we should sort that out.
Yes,
So thank you, Ms. P.
Goes back to that. Well, that actually brings us now to the end of our discussion panel. Today, I want to thank everyone again for your contributions, and I'll call back our director at this time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Been a
Thank
lovely
you.
opportunity.
Oh, this was a wonderful experience.
Well, there we have it, ladies and gentlemen, students. Indeed, that was a very thought-provoking panel discussion from the panelists. They looked at various elements of Virgin Islands culture and heritage. And, you know, I was actually re-educated on certain aspects. So I want to, on behalf of the host institution, Virgin Islands Studies Institute of H. Laverty Stout Community College, I wish to thank the members of the panel who have made this activity possible today. Indeed, it was very informative and a very fruitful discussion. So first, I want to say thank you, Ms. P, for being here and for giving us, sharing with us your wealth of knowledge about these aspects of our culture and our heritage. And to Mrs. Letsomtai, also about the national symbols and all that you said. Some of it, like I said, didn't quite know. I was re-educated on those aspects. Thank you for that. Dr. Angel Smith, the historian extraordinaire, thank you for your insight and helping us to understand how we move from colony day to territory day now to Virgin Islands Day. Wonderful. And also to Dr. Catherine Smith, our cultural policies and all that we need to do to keep us on that right path. And to Ms. Bria, your insight as a young person, thank you for that. I thought that was wonderful. And Rodney, Mr. Skelton, wonderful again how you explain, the whole marrying of the culture and the tourism and so on. I also thought it was wonderful. To a very able moderator, Ms. Annika Christopher, a job well done.
Very much.
To the Ministry of Education, the Premier's Office, and to Ms. Alicia Ham of HLSTC and her team, and to Ms. Harmony Turnbull, Bria Smith, Mr. Michael Jack, and Mr. Abru Penn of the HLSTC team. I thank you all very much, and let us continue to enjoy Virgin Islands Day today. Thank you.